Quick overview for the talk this evening. I'm going to be going through the macronutrients very quickly, just so we understand where protein lies in the macronutrient pyramid or triangle. Then we're going to talk about animal protein versus plant protein, the pros and cons of both. We're going to look at some studies that compare healthy omnivores to vegetarians. And we'll be getting into some vegetarian omnivore myths. And then we'll look at animal food dangers, so protein sources from animals and the dangers associated with them. We'll talk about plant-based proteins and various sources of those. And then lastly, we'll finish on protein supplements. During the talk, I will also be touching on my journey with protein and with increasing my protein intake. And I have a few slides to share. So let's see if I can bring up the first one. I think this is the one. So for those on Zoom, you can see a very simple little triangle. It describes the macronutrients, or shows the different macronutrients. Carbohydrates, protein, and fats are the three. Oxygen is the other one, but that one you don't eat as much as drink. So we don't have to focus on that one much this evening. I'm not going to leave the screen up because it's very, very simple. Carbohydrates are basically essential for your energy. They are your fuel, body's fuel. Simple, the more refined they are, the more the fiber is stripped out, the nutrients are stripped out, you end up with sugar or empty calorie carbohydrates. Those disturb your sugar metabolism, they damage your organs like your pancreas, they lead to type 2 diabetes. So you want to minimize simple sugars and refined carbohydrates as much as possible. You want to look at whole foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and obviously as organic as possible. Fats, you obviously also have to have fats in your diet. They're essential, even though there was a fat scare from the 80s onwards. Fats are also an energy source. They're used in cell membrane production so that your cells are separate from the rest of the body. Fat-soluble vitamins that you don't get from carbohydrates or proteins are A, D, E, and K. There is a big difference between raw fat and cooked fat. The more temperature, the more heat the fat is exposed to, the more it's going to be damaged and the more dangerous that fat's going to be to you. So as far as possible, keep your fat as raw as possible. Then the other question of fat is always, what about saturated fat? Polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat. I heard that saturated fat was bad for you. Well, that's a myth. It's now been completely debunked. Saturated fat is essential. You need saturated fat as much as you need the others. We do live in a world where people eat far too few omega-3 fats. They're also very heat sensitive, so are destroyed very quickly through high temperature or any temperature cooking. So make sure that you're getting enough raw saturated fats and raw omega-3s. And the threes, you can specifically look at things like hemp seeds and flax seeds and fish. And that's where you're going to get your fats. But obviously it's a protein talk, so I'm going to focus on protein. When we're considering protein, we're looking at something that builds and repairs your system. So one of the things to bear in mind is that if we look at carbohydrates as your fuel for your body, that's like kindling. It burns really quickly, it energizes you very quickly. If you look at fat, fat is a bit more like throwing a log on a fire, in the fire of your digestion. The log is going to burn slowly, it's going to burn longer. So if you're running on fat as a fuel source, your blood sugar tends to be more stable, your energy tends to be more stable. This is why a lot of athletes move more towards a ketogenic type of diet, because it gives them more long burn energy. Not to say that you don't obviously need sugars or carbs, you absolutely do. And then protein, I mean, that would be like putting a massive log on the fire. Your body really doesn't like using it for fuel. You can avoid, well, it's just not used for fuel very well. So what is protein used for? Building and repairing. And initially, when you're a baby, you get your protein needs met from breast milk. Human breast milk, hopefully, because that's where you should get all your nutrients you need. Breast milk, interestingly enough, contains about 3% protein, so it's surprisingly low for a baby growing that quickly. For many years, you know, one of the things I would do is debunk the level of protein you need. I mean, some recommendations are very high, up to 120 grams of protein a day sometimes. And I found that those recommendations, as I've said, tend to be too high, particularly if you have a lifestyle that isn't very focused on bodybuilding or intense exercise. About 60, even as low as 40 grams of high quality protein a day can give your body all it needs for building and repairing. If you are going to get into more strenuous exercise or bodybuilding, then you're going to have to push that up. Particularly if you want to put on muscle or weight, you're going to have to up that quite a lot. I'll tell you about my story a little bit later on. And then key thing here is the quality versus the quantity. There's this idea that complete protein is the only protein your body will absorb, and this is where the idea that you can only get complete protein from meat originally came from. This is another thing that's been debunked. Protein, any food with protein is going to be absorbable. Your body pulls amino acids. Those amino acids are used to then build your own cells. Obviously, if you are lacking amino acids consistently in eating a diet that doesn't contain complete protein, then you are going to run into trouble. And vegan vegetarian diets often do have this happen because people don't take enough notice of making sure that they're getting complete protein. Now, you can get complete protein from plants and from animals. It's not that you can only get it from animal sources. A cow gets all its protein from grass. My vegetarian vegan favorite protein sources are chlorophyll rich foods. This is where big primates get their protein needs met. Leaves are up to 30% protein. So eating things like greens and sprouts and veggies and particularly the greens, that's going to be a lot of protein. But if you really, as a plant-based food eater, want to get your protein needs, you're going to have to look at superfoods. Superfoods are superfoods because they're very high in nutritional density. So I'm going to touch on it later again, but things like spirulina at 70% protein by weight, hemp seeds at 35% protein by weight. To give you a comparative, beef, if you're eating a steak, is only 20 to 25% protein by weight. So these are very condensed protein source foods. So that's really the quick overview on protein as a macronutrient. Let me show you one more slide here. So one of the dangers with animal food and the Western diet is that it tends to become very acidifying. So if you look at that diagram there, you've got animal food on the left, and that's anything from bones to organs to muscle. Bones being the storehouse of alkalinity, muscle being the acidity, and organs being somewhere in the middle. And then you've got plant foods where the leaves and the stems and the fruits and the flowers are alkaline, and the roots and the seeds tend to be acidic. So the Western diet tends to be the muscle, the roots, and the seeds. Think about a burger, a bun, a patty, pretty much everything is acidic. And one of the ways to improve your health is to increase the amount of alkaline forming foods you eat. So if you are going to be eating animal foods, make sure that you consume some of the bones and certainly the organ meats. And if you're not, then make sure you're getting a lot more greens, concentrated alkaline sources. All right. Plant versus animal protein. So I have to be honest, I stood on stage and highly recommended people go more towards a plant-based diet, and I still recommend that. I think that people tend to eat too much meat for the reason I mentioned earlier, the acidity of it. But I didn't recommend that people stop eating all meat. For some people, meat is essential, or at least some sort of animal protein food is essential. And it depends on who you are, your metabolism, your digestion, your age, the kind of exercise and lifestyle you live. So there are a lot of factors. So, I'm not a proponent of an ism, as in a veganism or a vegetarianism or any ism. Those are boxes that disconnect you from feeling what your body needs when your body needs it. I prefer for people to be focused on higher quality food and choosing foods that are safer. So whether that's animal foods or plant foods, certified organic, clean sources that aren't full of poisons and toxins. Unfortunately, animal foods are one of the highest sources of poisons and toxins and chemicals. I'm going to mention that in a minute. But I basically did a 7-year vegan experiment. And during that time, I had 5 years of an amazing honeymoon effect and was feeling amazing, sleeping very little at night, running multiple businesses, just really flying. And then kind of towards the end of the experiment, the last 2 years, started finding that my body weight was dropping out really low at like 62, 63 kilos, which is very light for me at almost 6 foot tall. I started having low energy levels. I started getting more colds and flus, which I hadn't had for years before. And one of the things I do is also test my blood. I've done that for many years because I'm experimenting on myself really and want to see that I'm healthy. So I would do things like homocysteine tests. Homocysteine is a great way of checking on your cardiovascular system and whether or not it's in a healthy state or not. And my homocysteine, when I tested in 2010, was at almost 19, which is very, very high, dangerously high. So I was like, how is this possible? You know, how can I be at a point where I'm risking a heart attack and I'm on the best diet in the world? So looking into it, B12 is very much an indicator. If you're low in vitamin B12, you can be very high in homocysteine, and I was pretty low in B12. So I supplemented with B12 like many vegan vegetarians do, which is obviously highly recommended, and it improved a little bit, but not a lot. And I also had a bit of an ethical dilemma with supplementation. I've always been a bit of a naturalist, wanting to get all my nutrients or live as close to nature and in harmony with nature as possible. So if my diet is perfect, why would I actually need to supplement? I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron. If you're getting everything you need from your diet, then supplements are unnecessary. Now, if you want to tweak or like get to a hyper level of health, then supplements can, you know, be used. But for baseline health, as in like cardiovascular health, which homocysteine is an indicator, that should never have been that high in my situation. So, you know, I specifically started adding in certain animal foods that I knew would be high in B12, things like oysters. And by 2018, my homocysteine had halved at around 9. So radically reduced by just adding a little bit of animal foods, egg yolks, that kind of thing. We also moved out to our farm about 5 years ago, and living on a farm is just more body focused. You know, I'm outside, I'm doing work, I build a lot of stuff, I've got a big vegetable garden, fruit trees, we got horses, I'm missioning for a lot of the day, and I just felt like I needed more dense food. That I wasn't getting by on the light food, and that's where animal foods really hit that spot for me. And at that time I also felt like, you know, I wanted to bulk up a little bit. I had been very, very slim for many years at about 62. I've been listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast for many years and had his book, The 4-Hour Body. Many years ago I read his book, The 4-Hour Work Week, and was really inspired by that. So started working through his book. And, you know, the food recommendations are tons of animal foods, beans and some spinach, and that was pretty far from my diet, so I modified it quite greatly, including lower levels of animal food. Beans don't really work for me, legumes don't really work for me, upping the spinach a lot, but then supplementing with protein shakes and protein powders. And at the time, there really wasn't anything that I liked the flavor of or the nutrient mix of, so I was just making my own with various ingredients, as I tend to do. And over a year, I managed to shift my body weight from 63 all the way up to 77, which was a pretty radical shift for me. And people don't really understand what happens when you change your body to that degree. I'll show you a picture quickly. Where are we? There we are. If you guys can see that one, that's a before and after, 1 year apart. You know, I have to say I was, you know, doing some weights, but I was only doing about 40 minutes a week of gym maximum, 2 gym sessions a week, you know, and that's one of the things about the 4-Hour Body book, is that he's saying it takes 4 hours a month of bodybuilding to shift your weight radically and to drop fat radically, because obviously some people don't want to bulk up, they maybe just want to lose weight, and the same thing happens. So that was on minimum exercise, very specific exercises, but he does say that about most of any weight gain you're looking for is going to be from the food you consume, and then the exercise, and then supplementation as a last point. So yeah, it was pretty awesome experience for me. I mean, it really felt like it was the first time I was actually in my body, that I could move stuff around more easily, that I just felt more stable and strong. And I mean, I'm on 77 anymore. I've stabilized at about 74 on a day-to-day with minimal exercise. But one of the things I was also aware of is that if you want bone density to last and not get into osteoporotic conditions later on in life, you need to do some kind of weight training. Your bones need to have weights pushed up against them. So adding weight improves your bone mass. And I saw that. I've got a fancy scale that tells me my bone density, or bone mass, and water content and muscle mass and all that kind of stuff. So I saw not only my muscle mass increase, but also my bone density increase, or my bone mass increased. So that was a really cool experiment. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And a lot of people, when they found out I was eating animal foods again, were like, Peter Daniel's eating animal foods, and it was like horrendous and like terrible, and how could he, and he's such a traitor. I'm like, seriously, you should definitely consider your life and health more than other people's and what they choose to do. You know, I have definitely recommended eating plant foods, and I still definitely recommend eating plant foods as, you know, predominant aspect of your diet. But I've never argued that animal foods don't play any role in your health. That would be ridiculous. The reason it would be ridiculous is that there is no history of a race of purely vegetarian people anywhere. And if you look at the archaeological studies and our hominid ancestors, you know, we've apparently been eating animal foods for at least 2.5 million years. You know, that's so to consider that we could go from that to vegan in one lifetime or just a couple of years is, I think, a little bit foolish. I'm not saying it's impossible to be vegan. I think some people definitely can be vegan. It works for their body types. They supplement very carefully. They're very conscious of their diet. But I require some animal foods, and you know, I was the first one that was like, what, I can't eat animal foods, they're bad. But after trying it, and the other thing that inspired me to try it again was just once you have children, you know, experimenting on yourself is one thing, but on children, it's an entirely different thing. I certainly didn't want my kids to run into any kind of nutrient deficiencies later on, and I'd read a lot of books on child nutrition, and their brains are growing really fast. They need DHA, which you really can't get from animal foods unless you're using algae, which is extremely expensive. It's a supplement, basically. So, you know, and noticing how they just gobbled animal foods up. I mean, it was quite impressive, and they very, very clean diet. So if we look at, you know, nutrients that you would get from plant foods, because as I've said, I love plant foods. I'll share this slide with you guys. There it is. There are loads of amazing nutrients you need from plant foods. You know, as I mentioned, the alkalinity, but there's vitamin C, there's carotenoids, there's allium class vegetable sulfides, there's polyphenols, there's flavonoids, which are all the antioxidants. You can see there's lots in the list. Prebiotic fibers. I mean, actually, the soluble and insoluble fibers at the bottom of that list are probably the most important things you would get from plant foods, because they feed the good bacteria in your gut. Plant foods are the food for your gut bacteria. And your gut bacteria, there's more of them than there are cells of your body. So you're really feeding them so they can feed you. So that's where plant foods really shine. And that's why I recommend a high plant food diet. And they're responsible for so many things in your body. 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So if you're not feeding your good bacteria, and most people, because animal foods don't really feed them. So you're going to be starving them, really. That's why plant foods are essential. But saying that, animal foods give you certain nutrients that you can't really get from plant foods. Vitamin B12, for example, you do get a tiny bit from algae, but it's not really enough to maintain long-term stores of B12, as was shown in my own blood tests. Heme iron, it's a more oxidating kind of iron, but for some people, they don't absorb non-heme iron, as in plant iron, very well. My wife Baron was an example of this throughout pregnancies. One of the things you have to do is to test your iron levels for home births, and all 3 of our children were born at home, and we've followed her iron levels, and it was always pretty good from the beginning. Particularly the first child, Katara, you know, we had been vegans for 7 years, so it was very interesting to see how quickly her iron levels started bottoming out. And we supplemented, and that helped to a degree, but it was really when animal foods came in that actually changed. Zinc. Zinc is a nutrient you can get from seeds, but you really have to eat a lot of them. Preformed vitamin A, I mean, you do get vitamin A from plant sources, but it's not in the form that your body can absorb as easily. I say high quality protein. I mean, it's a bit of a misnomer, as we've already gone through. Other specific amino acids are listed there. Vitamin K2, vitamin D, that's probably the most important on the list. K2 essential for bone health, vitamin D essential for bone health and for your immune system, and you really don't get those from plant foods. I mean, you get a tiny bit of vitamin D in certain things. K1 you can get from plant foods, but not K2. And then you got DHA, which is the long chain omega-3, Also very hard to get from plant foods. You have to go to marine animals for that. EPA and CLA are other omega-3s that are more prevalent in animal foods. So, I'm not recommending people move to a plant diet or an animal diet. I recommend increasing the amount of plant foods you consume, because you're only going to get benefit from that. And then animal foods, choosing ones that are going to be clean and good sources. So for those who are vegan or vegetarian or have been for a while and feel like you could have some type of deficiency, I recommend just checking out your vitamin B12 levels, calcium levels, iron, zinc, DHA, fat-soluble vitamins like A and D, and then collagen. And those you can supplement with and get hold of in different protein supplements. And specific amino acids like choline, creatine, taurine, methionine, and glycine tend to be low in plant foods. So if you want to stay vegan, vegetarian, research where you can find those amino acids in plants in higher quantities. One of the interesting things that I discovered in researching animal foods is that I'd always believed that people who ate animal foods lived shorter than people who ate plant foods, until I realized or was told by one of my mentors that most of the studies that are done on unhealthy omnivores and vegetarian vegans. Now, if you're a vegetarian vegan, you already have some idea that eating healthier is better, generally. So you're going to be healthier than your average junk food eater from the start, for sure. And obviously, deficiencies can appear over time, but initially, you're definitely going to be healthier. So if you have a look at these studies, I found this fascinating. So they actually have done quite a few studies where they've compared healthy omnivores to vegetarian vegans. And what's interesting, you can read this is the Health Food Shoppers study, 10,000 subjects over a 5-year period in England. And they basically find that both of them lived longer than the general population. But there was no survival difference between vegetarians or omnivores. Then you've got another one, which is the Oxford Vegetarian Study, 11,000 people over 4 years. Again, both vegetarians and health-conscious omnivores had lower risk of early death than the general, but there's no difference in lifespan. And then the EPIC Oxford, this was looking at cancer and nutrition and was 44,000 participants in the UK. With a follow-up, found that the risk of death for both vegetarian, vegans, and omnivores was 52% lower than the general population. So the great news is that if you eat healthy food, you have a half mortality risk. Like, that's huge. That's absolutely massive. But again, no difference in mortality between the omnivores or the vegetarians. So, obviously people then mention that it's better for the earth to be vegan, vegetarian, and I would agree. If you're eating factory farmed animals, that's definitely going to be better, but I never recommend eating factory farm animals. Those KFOs, confined farming operations, are radically dangerous and damaging to the environment. If you consider factory farming as a thing, I'm going to run through a few stats for you. South Africans eat about 2.5 million chickens a day, and there are 26 million chickens in battery cages in South Africa. They're the size of an A4 page. So if you're eating those kind of chickens, that's going to give you massive amounts of toxicity and poisons. We have our own chickens. Katara, my daughter, loves them. They all have names. We get eggs from them. Occasionally we have too many roosters and then we have to eat them, and I'll do that myself. One of the other things that I've always said, if you're willing to kill it, then maybe you can eat it. There's a level of consciousness that goes with recognizing that all living things provide you with nourishment, and to honor those things for giving up their lives. Whether it's a plant or an animal, they both wanted to keep living. So gratitude at every meal is something I've practiced for many years and highly recommend. Then they chuck tons of hormones and antibiotics into cattle feed around South Africa. I mean, there's grain-fed. If it's grain-fed, basically it's another way of saying feedlot, so definitely avoid that kind of thing. I'm not even getting into pig farming. That's absolutely atrocious. RBHG, which is genetically modified growth hormone that they feed to cattle, has been banned in over 100 different countries. In South Africa, 50% of cattle farmers still use this banned substance. So eating non-certified organic beef is very, very risky. And RBHG has been linked to increased rates of colon, breast, and prostate cancer in studies. So you're increasing your cancer risk, basically, if you eat those things. You know, the scale of animal cruelty in industrial farming is truly incomprehensible. You know, there's lots of movies you can watch about this. But if watching that movie makes you throw the baby out with the bathwater and throw out all animal foods, I think the point has been missed. The point is, stop supporting companies that damage the earth, whether they're growing plant foods or whether they're growing animal foods. If they're damaging the earth through non-sustainable farming practices, don't spend money with them, because you're keeping them going if you do. And there are alternatives. The alternatives are around. So one of the other challenges with animal protein sources is that when you cook meat, you lose up to 50% of the bioavailability of the meat. So you want to really consume things as rare as possible. Those kind of proteins that are damaged increase aging and disrupt cellular function. So just lower temperature cooking, generally a good thing. You know, you avoid things like advanced glycation end products, you avoid things like acrylamides. These are all dangerous things in your system. So lower temperature cooking. Then, I mean, obviously, if you're buying like ready-made meals or meat in packets in supermarkets, I mean, they add things like all sorts of poisons to that food, colorants, flavorants, preservatives. So just be very aware that that's dangerous. And then if it's not organic, the leading source of pesticide residue in the US diet is from meat at 55%. Animal foods account for the most at about 80% of pesticide residue. So when you're consuming animal foods, you need to be exceptionally careful about the sourcing, because that's where you would get most of your pesticide, herbicide, fungicide hits. And those things are toxic, as toxic to you as they are to the animals that consume them or the plants that they sprayed on. The only thing is, you're slightly bigger than a bug, so you tend to not notice it, at least not initially. It takes years for those kind of poisons to damage your system. All right, what else have we got? So what about plant sources of protein? Soybeans have been a huge growth industry in the world over the last couple of decades, and soy protein is still pretty common. I've never been a fan. I was aware very early on that soya contained toxins that are dangerous to the system, and they have to process the soya bean in order for it to be even digestible. So traditionally they would process soya through fermentation or boiling. So fermentation, you would end up with something like soya sauce or tempeh or tofu, or you could boil the beans for an incredibly long time until they become soft enough to eat. In industry, though, they don't have the time for either of those, so they wash soybeans in aluminium tanks, which leach high amounts of aluminium into the final products. Nitrites, which are potent carcinogens, are produced from the spray drying process, and artificial flavors like MSG are added to many soya foods. So if you're consuming things like soya protein isolate or textured vegetable protein, I would definitely recommend you avoid those. Those are pretty dangerous to your health. Then there's also estrogen, lots of estrogen in soya. So for guys who are trying to bulk up, estrogen is just going to give you a nice stomach and some man boobs. There's not going to be much bulking there. Eating as little as 30 grams a day can result in hypothyroidism with symptoms of lethargy, constipation, weight gain, and fatigue, which is not a lot of soya. So if you're a big soya fan, I definitely recommend minimizing on that. So I mentioned this right at the beginning. For me, the favorite source of protein from plant foods are from superfoods. And my two favorites are spirulina and hemp. So spirulina, also known as chlorophyll protein, one of the highest chlorophyll containing foods in the world and one of the highest protein containing foods. That's 70% by weight. That's 334% more protein than beef. I've got a slide for that. Let's see. So if you have a look at that, there you've got spirulina is the first at 70%. Then you've got biltong, which is higher than beef because it's dried. So they remove the water weight: fish, beef, soybeans, tofu. So consuming spirulina regularly is definitely going to give you a great amount of protein. Obviously, it's pretty concentrated stuff, so I wouldn't use it as like a protein replacement. It would be more as a protein supplement if you're exercising. For me, Spirulina has other stuff which is incredible, like all complex B vitamins, so for energy. It's fantastic. It's got a massive amount of calcium, more than milk. It has lots of iron, more than spinach, and it contains high levels of antioxidants. So for me, it's one of the go-to supplements if you're looking to supplement with something that is actually a food. And then the other one that I highly recommend is hemp. So I've been eating hemp seeds for many, many years. I started eating hemp seeds when I was living in the UK in the early 2000s. And if you have a look at the amino acid breakdown here of hemp seed, whole hemp seed is the red line. And then they're comparing egg whites, soy tofu, human breast milk, and cow's milk. And you can see, I mean, they're the branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine. These are ones that are very often missing from vegetarian diets, valine, methionine. And you can see that hemp seed is much higher by weight than any of those other sources. So I've been using hemp seed, as I've said, for 15, 16 years, and it's by far my favorite source of protein. It's also one of the least expensive sources of protein. The protein comes from the seed. They basically press the oil out of the seed and then mill the leftovers into a protein powder, which we've been selling for many years through our brand Soaring Superfoods. The resulting powder is 35% protein by weight. So if you consider beef again as a 20 to 25% protein, that's a very high protein level. It's also all your essential amino acids are there, so it's a complete protein source. The type of protein that hemp is called edistin protein, which is amazing for creating antibodies and a healthy immune system. It's similar to egg white, so it's very easily absorbed and utilized for building tissue. And then the other benefit, which you don't get from animal proteins, is it contains fiber naturally. So it's going to be feeding your good bacteria and feeding your own cells at the same time. And the hemp seeds, you know, they're the main source. I mean, for me, the ideal here is to grow hemp in your own garden. You can do that now. And then once a year, it'll go to seed, and you harvest and collect all those seeds, and you dry those seeds out in a dehydrator or in the sun, and you have hemp seeds. The way you would then use it, because it's obviously not shelled, is that you would just blend it in a blender and then pour it through a sieve, and you would be making hemp milk. And hemp milk is probably the most amazing dairy alternative you can find. It's got all the protein, all the essential aminos are there, it's fresh, it's delicious. I mean, I make homemade hemp milk almost every day from seed that I got from my own garden, so I highly recommend you do that. And this is another one of those foods that can feed the hungry worldwide, because hemp is such a versatile plant. They call it weed for a reason. It grows everywhere. So, you know, it can feed any person anywhere. You know, having a few plants in your garden, you get quite a few kilograms of seed. It's quite impressive. Okay, so those are my favorite food sources, or at least food supplements, superfood sources. As I mentioned earlier, doing my own bodybuilding type training, I was looking for a protein source that increased a little bit more than 35%. I found that I didn't like anything out there from a flavor point of view and ingredients point of view. I mean, if you look at if you look at sports shops, at what sports shops sell as protein supplements, it's absolutely shocking. It's 50%, sometimes as high as 60% sugar, like sucrose. They put sugar in protein supplements, which is totally insane, but people won't eat it otherwise, it's not sweet. And then on top of that, it's colorants and flavorants, artificial, dangerous stuff. Health food shops are obviously better, but most people are looking to add protein to their diet from a bodybuilding or an exercise point of view. I'm going into a health food shop for it. People who are into health are at a health food shop. And even the health food shop ones are very low in protein usually. They contain pea protein, which doesn't work for my body. Every time I eat it, it just messes with my digestive system. Legumes are not well tolerated by many people. Added sweeteners, whether it's sugar or whether it's other things, really don't work for me. And usually they make them so hyper sweet anyway. I've spent 10, 15 years reducing my need for sugar, particularly refined sugars. So then I went, so what I actually want in a protein mix, I wanted a high amount of protein, like at least around half. I wanted it to be made out of superfoods and super herbs, and if I was going to put a sweetener in, it would have to be a potent herbal product too. I'd want it to be affordable and obviously pea-free because it doesn't work for me. Certified organic, it's something that's very hard to find too. How about some adaptogenic herbs? I mean, you're doing exercise, adaptogenic herbs are going to help you adapt to the stress that the exercise has on your body. So I made myself a protein shake, and I shared it with some of my friends, and they totally loved it. And this is 2 years ago already that I've been using it. And then eventually we decided, well, why don't we make it available to everyone? So I've been working hard at trying to bring these ingredients in, and we're finally ready to launch our new plant-based protein superfood mix, and it's freaking awesome. It ticks all of my boxes of what I like. Everyone I've given it to says it tastes absolutely. That's a picture of what the retail packaging is going to look like for you guys on the screen there. It's 43% protein, which is fantastic. It's higher than most out there. And then, I mean, I've done two flavors. I've done a chocolate flavor and a cinnamon flavor. And the chocolate one is our new African cacao, so it tastes absolutely delicious. We've got fiber-rich mesquite in the shake too, so that you get all of those, the sweetness, but it's a sweetness that doesn't spike your blood sugar levels, which I was very keen on, because if you want to build muscle and lose weight, consuming protein shakes full of sugar, it does the opposite really, because as soon as the sugar comes into your system, you just start building more fat. So reducing sugar content is key there. I also wanted digestive health, so I put in chia seeds, omega-3 rich chia seeds, and also hemp seeds. Maca powder for hormone and for fitness is fantastic. Cinnamon, and the cinnamon one is amazing for blood sugar balancing too. And then I added ashwagandha, which is a powerful adaptogen. And then the sweetener, I added 0 GI monk fruit. So I'm going to get to monk fruit in a minute. And then the protein sources, I wanted to use hemp because it's my favorite. So I found a source of hemp protein powder with a slightly higher percentage of protein. So that's the main protein source. But it's not the same hemp protein as we have in our hemp protein tubs that we sell. And then the other protein source is brown rice protein. So brown rice is eaten by more people on the planet than any other food known. And we get a high concentrated protein by enzymatically cleaving the protein from the carbohydrates. So you can get a very high level of protein. And it's also tested to be safe because a lot of rice proteins are contaminated with things. Certified organic, all the ingredients are certified organic, the hemp, the rice, all of it. So monk fruit, what is monk fruit? Some of you have probably never heard about it. It's a Chinese medicinal herb called lo hang go. It's a small green melon. It's been cultivated for centuries by Buddhist monks. That's why it's called monk fruit. It's about 150 to 200 times sweeter than sugar. And the sweetness comes from a chemical called a glucoside, called mongrosides, that are also potent antioxidants. So they're potently sweet, but they're also potent antioxidants. So it doesn't have any calories, there's no carbohydrates, there's no sugar, it's not going to spike your blood sugar level, it's 0 GI. So it's ideal for people with diabetes, and obviously ideal for people who want to be exercising without the sugar hit. In traditional Chinese medicine, monk fruit is used for relieving coughs, for acute bronchitis, for tonsillitis, for sore throats, and upper respiratory issues. So it's actually fantastic right now in this whole coronavirus palaver. So brilliant. So that's the sweetener, and then we've obviously decided to put it into compostable packaging, as we do with all of our products. Because of the coronavirus situation, packaging has just been very slow, so we're actually launching this with a packaging light version initially, which will only be available from our web shop, but it'll mean that you guys save up to 15% on the eventual retail price. And that's going to be in a 100% biodegradable NatureFlex bag with a paper sticker, and it's super easy to use, tastes delicious. You can just add it to smoothies or juices. And it's going to be available on our website literally from tomorrow. So if you guys are on a mailing list, then you can find that. We can also post links in various places. I mean, I can post a link in the chat, but you can just search for protein on our website. So I'm very excited about that, and I think that's it. I've covered everything I wanted to do this evening.